The International Energy Agency says new legislation by the United States aimed at combating domestic inflation is the most important climate agreement since the Paris Accord. IEA Executive Director Fatih Birol was speaking on this at a panel on energy security at the World Economic Forum. He said the Inflation Reduction Act would drive investment into cleaner energy and that energy security is now the biggest driver of climate investment.
Finally, our role as consumers.
In addition to this immediate response to energy crisis, there is also more structural response coming from the countries, such as from the United States, the Inflation Reduction Act. In my view, the most important climate action after Paris 2015 agreement. The IRA, Inflation Reduction Act from the United States, Fit for 55 from Europe, Japan, Green Transformation of Japan, the incentives, huge incentives in India for the batteries, or China pushing in their 5-year plan, big new clean energy technology manufacturing. This is a second dimension in addition to the current immediate responses in terms of renewable efficiency, the heat pumps, electric cars. We are seeing a big push, mainly driven by industrial policies of the countries. I think they will merge, and we will hopefully will have a secure and clean energy future.
Meanwhile, U.S. climate envoy John Kerry says time is running out for the world to tackle climate change. He is also not convinced the world would get to a low-carbon economy in time to avoid the worst impacts for some of the most vulnerable people. According to Mr. Kerry, what is most needed to tackle climate change and to deliver a low-carbon economy is money, money, money. The climate envoy was speaking during a panel discussion on the second day of the World Economic Forum, and this was a resort of Davos.
I have said this before, but I say it again. I'm convinced we will get to a low-carbon, no-carbon economy. We're going to get there because we have to. I am not convinced we're going to get there in time to do what the scientists said, which is avoid the worst consequences of the crisis. And those worst consequences are going to affect millions of people all around the world. So how do we get there? Well, the lesson I've learned in the last years, and I learned it as secretary, and I've learned it since, reinforced in spades, is money, 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 money. And I'm sorry to say that. I mean, yes, technology, yes, exciting new initiatives, yes, organizing, winning races politically. I mean, what happened in the midterms in the United States is nothing less than miraculous. And it happened because young people voted. And the second most voted issue was climate. I've said this many times, but I want you all to focus on it. 20 countries, 20 economies equal 80% of all the emissions. You solve the problem to start with by making sure all of those 20 countries are doing what they need to do. And that includes the United States, China, Russia, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Brazil. You know who they are. We have to pull them to the table and leverage further. And I think that's doable. But time is, in fact, running out on us.
Well, as the World Economic Forum delegates gather again in Davos this year, some fear that a long period of peace, prosperity and global economic integration could be coming to a close, just as it did in 1914. This year's Davos slogan is cooperation in a fragmented world, and that fragmentation began with COVID-19. It's lockdowns, closed borders, disrupted supply chains. So the 2023 WEF, the first to take place in its regular winter location since the pandemic began, could be seen as signaling a return to normalcy. But COVID has left its mark on the way governments, businesses think about globalization. The assumption that goods and commodities can always be shipped easily around the world has been shattered. Joining me now is Mr. Marcel Okeke. He's an economist, strategy and sustainability expert who can help put things into perspective for us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great to have you. Tell us, can there still be cooperation in a fragmented world with the many global issues facing us today?
Thank you for the question. In this day and age, no country can live as an island unto itself. No matter the level of insecurity and no matter the kind of pandemic, no country can, strictly speaking, live as an island unto itself. In economics, it used to be called autarky, meaning that the country, doesn't trade with the rest of the world. It produces all its needs and uses all it produces and remains, self-sufficient. That's a theoretical creation. So the reality is that it's quite challenging. It's quite tough, but that doesn't mean that every country now has to stay on its own. There must be a way out. Yes, COVID-19 has affected the way the world used to live. The world being a global village. COVID-19 has affected that. And you see many countries, operating in a nationalistic way, meaning that they are more interested in what, is the most important for them or for their people. But haven't come this far, and the pandemic tapering off or coming down, the world is coming back, and that is why we're talking about the World Economic Forum today in Davos, meaning that we have come back to a large extent to pre-2020 situation, and going forward is expected that there will be these conferences, to chart the way forward, so that the world will begin to once again come together as a global village, and each one trading with the rest of the world. That's the way it is. So we cannot say that we have come to the end of globalization. Certainly not. But it may not come back to what it used to be before pandemic, because technology, has come to play a lot of role. There was, the COVID-19 sort of brought some kind of technology and gave it some kind of shot in the arm, and everything suddenly started happening. So we can't go to pre-pandemic situation, so to speak, but we'll certainly come back to normal, all things being equal. Thank you.
So there were some advantages and then, in the midst of the disadvantages. But, China is also one country that learned the hard way with its zero COVID policy, and now the opening up and trying to catch up, But then there are several other issues. Inequality is one, and there are many drivers for this, which we're witnessing today. Extremely rich getting richer, and extreme poverty, the poor getting poorer. Is it possible to redistribute the wealth?
It's not impossible to redistribute wealth, but it's not an easy thing to do. Every human activity or corporate activity or every economic agent's activity is policy driven. In other words, it's a kind of policy that is put in place that will determine, how investors and where investors invest. That will also determine, where people decide to live on this surface of the earth. Talking about bridging the wealth gap or inequality gap. When you talk about a country, for example, a country can, through fiscal policy, you come down to a segment of it which is talking about taxation. You now decide to have a progressive tax rate, which means the richer you are, the more you are taxed. That's one way of doing that. You also have to pay more wages, increase the wages you pay to people, and then begin to levy what is called luxury taxes, so that these big people or wealthy people who consume those luxury items, we have to really pay something substantial. And then when the tax rate is progressive, it means that people who are poor, will not bear much of the tax burden, but the rich people will be bearing the tax burden. So everything in the fiscal policy, which includes taxation I have mentioned now, we target at bridging that gap. It will go a long way, and that's for a country. Now, when you talk about country, nations, business nation, that is the kind of thing they'll be discussing in Davos during this World Economic Forum, how to bridge the gap. And that is item number 10 in the sustainability development goals. Sustainable development goal, SDG, which has 2030 as its target. It's number 10, which is talking about closing the inequality gap. It's policy driven, because if at this World Economic Forum they now discuss on how to have properly planned migration, whereby people from poor countries could be migrating to the richer countries who really need some kind of cheap labor, that among other things will not be bridging the gap, so that the rich people will also be importing items produced in these poor countries and vice versa. That is where also the World Trade Organization will come in. You understand? So that these things are made in such a way that no country is placed at such a disadvantage that even when it produces, its products are rejected by other countries, such as the recent experience Nigeria used to have. When we send some of our agri products to some countries of the world, they are abandoned there to rot away. Either they are called substandard or whatever. So the World Trade Organization has to ensure that these policies are enforced so that these poor countries or goods coming from poor countries are not discriminated against. So through some of these policies, the inequality we are talking about, could be breached to a large extent. But the United Nations has it as item number 10 in its Sustainable Development Goals. So it's something that is being worked on seriously. And the target is that by 2030, such things will be properly handled. And, such a gap will be breached to a large extent. So that is the way they are done. Thank you.
I was just going to finally say, this policy you've talked about, this is definitely the role for politicians, yes? This year, what are some of the things that you think they should be doing, politicians, this year? Soaring wealth, poverty, gender inequality, among the other issues, high inflation.
When you talk about politicians, it's a general statement. I want to believe that you're talking about politicians in Nigeria. What is facing Nigeria today is the general election that is coming up in this first quarter, February and March. Okay, so what will be going on now is for candidates of various political parties, to be selling or marketing their ideas or such policies, or they are likely to put in place, if they win the election. As for the sitting government or the administration, current administration, it's already an outgoing kind of government. And so, even in the 2023 budget, a lot of inconsistencies, we have seen it. The president signed the budget, but he says he has to go back to some kind of deliberation between the executive and the legislature. So when you talk about politicians, we are talking about the ones who are running for various offices that we are, start for elections in February or March. And so, again, like I told you, whatever is going to happen after the election, be policy driven. Is the kind of policies those people put in place that will determine whether the gaps you mentioned will be breached, whether it is gender gap, whether it is wealth inequality in wealth, whether it's whatever discrimination. Is the policy those politicians go ahead to put in place that's going to handle all those things. You understand? So that's the way it's going to work out. The major thing facing Nigeria now, by politicians or whoever, is the coming election. That's the dominant issue. Thank you.
When I asked that question, I really did mean, the world, the politicians around the world, because, these are the issues. High inflation is facing us. It's also facing, other parts of the world and some of the other global issues before us today. But thank you for putting your perspective to Nigeria, and thank you for joining us on The World Today.
If you talk about the whole world, this year is the 2023 is still marked by uncertainty. It's marked by insecurity across the globe. It's marked by the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. So what politicians will be doing is to, first of all, find a way to come together and without the tension in various parts of the world, see how the Russia-Ukraine war, comes to an end. Already there is very high inflation, cost of food and cost of other items across the globe. Okay, and politicians, like I said earlier on, have to come up with policies, to redirect this trajectory and trend. Okay, nobody, no human being, no human effort, no human organization thrives in an insecure environment. So part of what the discussion at the World Economic Forum is how to move forward in a calm and secure environment. It's a very, very important issue. And then the politicians, like you asked, will also be talking about the well-being of the people. So whatever it was that COVID-19, crashed, they will not be discussing on how to revive this thing, like smooth trading across the globe. Again, the World Trade Center will come into focus this time, so that they have to bring their policies to bear, so whatever discrimination that used to be against some parts of the world, maybe Africa or that, all that has to be redressed or addressed, so that the developing countries are now encouraged, you understand, to do their best and then improve the well-being of their people. By so doing, the gap we are talking about will be largely breached.
We'd like to thank you. Mr. Masilo Keke is an economist, strategy and sustainability expert. Thank you for joining us on The World Today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I believe we don't have communication challenge on network.
It was fine. Thanks a lot. To all the stories now. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has announced the United Arab Emirates UAE decision to invest $30 billion in South Korea's industries as the two countries seek to expand economic cooperation. In a speech during the UAE Korea Business Forum in Abu Dhabi, Yoon hoped that the latest Emirati investment will generate many results in the global market. Details of the investment plan were not immediately known, but Yoon's press secretary said in a statement the investment will be directed at nuclear power, defense, hydrogen, solar energy industries, among others.
The Arab Emirates and the Republic of South Korea have had close relations through history, which has contributed to expanding cooperation and partnership between the two countries politically, economically, and culturally.
In other news, Belarus today put exiled opposition leader Svetlana Tishinuskaya on trial in absentia on treason charges and what the outspoken critic of veteran leader Alexander Lukashenko said would be a show. The 40-year-old Tishinuskaya fled Belarus after running against President Lukashenko in the 2020 presidential election, which was followed by mass protests over alleged electoral fraud. She faces a possible jail term of up to 15 years. Following a crackdown on protesters, she became the head of an opposition in exile and denounced the election after Lukashenko, in power since 1994, declared himself winner. According to her, there are no honest trials in Belarus.
I have to say that in Belarus there are no honest trials. We live in absolute lawlessness in our country. So tomorrow's trial will be on me, will be farce, show, but not like real justice, For sure I will not be presented there because I live in exile for more than 2 years already. And but I understand how it's important not to let Belarusian regime prosecute you without any consequences. So I demanded all the necessary documents from the so-called court. I demanded to connect myself with so-called lawyer who was admitted by this illegitimate government. I haven't had any reply, so I don't understand what this lawyer will do in this court tomorrow if he doesn't know my position, if he has never communicated to me, and but he is supposed to defend me. So we will see, but it doesn't make any changes for me at all. This trial is for regime, not for for us, because this is like personal revenge of Lukashenko on myself and actually on the other people who are opposing him.
Still to come on the program. US President Joe Biden is set to visit California as severe storms fade. You stay with us. We're learning more now following the arrest of Italian mafia boss Messina Denaro. Judicial sources say perfumes, designer label clothes have been found in an apartment which investigators believe was his last hideout. Authorities in Italy on Monday celebrated Denaro's arrest at a private hospital in Palermo after 30 years on the run. He's being held in the central Italian city of L'Aquila after being transferred from Sicily on the day of his arrest. Here's more.
Italians in Rome have welcomed the arrest of Sicilian mafia boss Matteo Messina Denaro a day after the arrest of the 60-year-old fugitive who'd been on the run for almost 30 years. Named Usuku, the skinny one, Messina picked up 20 life prison terms in trials held in absentia for his role in an array of mob murders, including the bomb attacks that killed anti-mafia prosecutors Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino in 1992.
It was about time. It is positive news. We thank the police forces who managed to achieve this result.
I was very surprised to hear the news because I had been seeing this story when I was a child. It seemed like things would always be like this, something that can never be changed. So I was positively surprised about what happened. With the joint work of police, there are still shadows. Everyone is asking how he managed to stay in his hometown for so many years, but we will see. Now we must focus on the positive side of the story.
Italian media reported Messina Denaro was moved away from Sicily following his arrest and landed late on Monday in the central Italian region of Abruzzo, but it was still unclear where he will be detained. Italian military police have searched the hideout of top mafia boss in Sicilian village of Campobello de Mezzara. Video released by Carabinieri police showed a sealed door of a building as Italian investigative police arrived at the scene. The 60-year-old was caught just outside a private clinic in Palermo together with an accomplice on January the 16th. Judicial sources said the mobster was a regular visitor there after a cancer operation last year. Palermo Chief Prosecutor Maurizio De Lucia says Messina Denaro spent his life hiding in various parts of Italy, but most recently stayed in his home province of Trapani in western Sicily and in the island's regional capital of Palermo. Yesterday at a news conference, the Palermo Chief Prosecutor says the Italian mobster was never the sole leader of the Sicilian mafia. Speaking at the same news conference, Colonel Lucio Arcidiacono of Palermo's unit of the Carabinieri police added that Messina was wearing a watch worth around 35,000 euros when officers detained him.
Matteo Messina Denaro has never been the sole leader of Cosa Nostra for a whole series of reasons that even the most experienced of you know. For example, the rules of the organization and the fact that the leader is or could be from Palermo and not Trapani. What remains, though, is that they have a great ability to be present in the business world, an important guarantee precisely for dealing with business.
For the Italian Prime Minister, the day he was caught is a day of celebration for good people, for the families of the victims of organized crime, because the sacrifice of so many heroes was not in vain, because someone picked up their legacy and the war was carried on.
Let's head to London, where hundreds of police officers are likely to be sacked for sexual and domestic abuse offences. This according to Britain's most senior police officer, Sir Mark Rowley, seeking to regain public trust after an officer admitted being a serial rapist. London's Metropolitan Police, the Met, which has been rocked by scandals in recent years, was plunged into further crisis after David Carrick, 48, admitted carrying out 24 counts of rape over almost 2 decades while serving as a police officer, while his colleagues missed chances to stop him. The case follows a series of revelations of serious wrongdoing at the force, Britain's biggest, with more than 43,000 officers and staff, and responsibility for leading the country's response to terrorism and issues such as extradition.
I've launched an anti-corruption and abuse command. I've put 30% more officers into that. We've done public and internal appeals, which has generated more than 250 more investigations. We're systematically reviewing every member of police staff and police officer who we have any historic flags against for being involved in any incident involving domestic abuse or sexual violence. I'm sure some of those will turn out to be nothing of concern, but many of them will turn out sadly to be of concern. And I've been candid. I've got tens of thousands of fantastic men and women, but I've got hundreds who shouldn't be here. I'm going to sort it out. We've let London down. David Carrick has been a horrifically abusive individual. What he's done to his victims is truly abhorrent. Their courage in coming forward is truly admirable. But we've let London down. He's been a police officer for 20 years. Through a combination of weak policies and weak decisions, over those 20 years, we missed opportunities when he joined, and subsequently, as behaviour came to the fore, that we should have removed him from policing. Whether it would have affected him being a sex offender, I don't know, but he shouldn't have been doing it as a police officer.
And to the US, where at least 8 people were shot during a Martin Luther King Jr. Day event at Fort Pierre yesterday. One person is in critical condition. The shooting took place 5:20 p.m. Eastern Time during the MLK Car Show and Family Fun Day. Officials said there were more than 1,000 people at the event. At St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office, they said the shooting started from a disagreement, but no arrests have been made yet. That's according to local media. Meanwhile, 6 people, including a 17-year-old mother and a 6-month-old baby, were killed in a shooting at a home in Goshen, California on Monday. Authorities have described the attack as targeted, calling it a horrific massacre. 6 victims were shot dead at Tulare County. The sheriff, Mike Bordereau, told reporters there were at least 2 suspects who had not been caught, adding that narcotic search warrants were conducted by the sheriff's office at that resident last week.
Deputies began calling for Morris.
Still in the United States, Californians may have felt like the day would never come, but the parade of deadly storms known as atmospheric rivers finally faded on yesterday after pounding the state for 3 weeks. The Golden State can now begin what is set to be lengthy repairs to damaged rivers and roads like this one in the central coastal town of Pasadena. Though authorities warn mud and rock slides are still a risk in steep areas as the ground remains saturated. US President Joe Biden will be surveying the damage in California's central coast on Thursday. The White House said he'll meet first responders, visit affected towns, and assess what additional federal support is needed. It comes after he approved federal emergency funding earlier in the month and on Saturday authorized major disaster aid for Merced, Sacramento, and Santa Cruz. And preparations are in top gear in the Democratic Republic of Congo ahead of Pope Francis' visit to the country. Now, Governor of the capital, Kinshasa, says the main city centre will be spruced up with street vendors and abandoned vehicles removed from roads connecting to Kinshasa International Market. Last month, the city experienced the worst floods in years that left more than 120 people dead. This is the first time the city of at least 14 million residents will be hosting Pope Francis.
Before dawn, crews from Kinshasa Sanitary Police Brigade, armed with crowbars and aided by a bulldozer, set on demolishing makeshift stalls that crowd the busy intersection and the main artery of the Democratic Republic of Congo's capital. The attempt to give a full facelift to the sprawling city of over 17 million comes 2 weeks before the visit of Pope Francis to the Central African nation on January the 31st. On January the 13th, Kinshasa's governor oversaw a day of operations and seemed satisfied the traffic had become more fluid after the clean-up exercise.
Today, the traffic is fluid here, and we hope it will always remain like that.
The Lumumba Boulevard is the main road leading to the airport that will welcome Pope Francis, and authorities have warned that development works will be carried out on site. Many families in the city depend on the so-called informal sector, which includes street stalls, side shops, and hawking for their livelihood. But this street vendor has no alternative to sell her goods.
It's not really a problem, given we're not allowed to sell on Lumumba Boulevard. But in our case, we don't sell on the road, just nearby. Despite that, the police still come here and chase us away. I'm a widow. I pay my rent. I have a lot of children. I pay their school fees with what I earn here. I have no other job, and now we're being told we can't sell here.
George Yalala, Kinshasa city coordinator for the campaign, said that the operation will continue after the Pope's visit.
The cleanup we are doing just now is not only because the Pope is coming. This cleanup operation will continue to be implemented. There will be no point at which we will be told to stop. We will continue until we accomplish the President's mission. He said Congo needs to change. He has shown us the way. Everyone must follow.
However, a Catholic priest, Victor Ntambwe, believes the authorities could have planned the operation better way before the visit.
I'm sorry for what the City Hall through the governor is doing. Did we have to wait for the Pope's visit to do something like this? I'm not sure we needed to wait for the Pope's arrival to start clearing the avenues and chase away street vendors. As we say, governing is planning. The people who govern should plan on what they should do.
Congolese authorities said the campaign is not directly linked to the Pope's visit, but rather an ongoing effort to free thoroughfares, pavements, and side streets, where traders and hawkers have set up shop, choking the city.
I guess it's all hands on deck for the papal visit. But that's our program this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker.